so now we're going to look a little bit at the distance formula. So if you look at this equation right here, it says distance, or D, equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So you might be looking at this and saying, okay, but what is x2, x1, y2, y1? So what we do is when we have 2 points and we need to find the distance between them, you can say x1, y1, meaning the x value in the first point and the y value in the first point, and x2, y2, meaning the x value in the second point and the y value in the second point. So if we go ahead and we can plug those numbers into our equation. So I'm going to go ahead and copy square root, and then it says x2. So I go and look at my x2, which is -7, minus my x1, which is -2, squared. Remember, add a line, change the sign, plus our y2, which is -7, minus y1, which is 3, squared. So when we do this, what we do is we kind of break it into sections. So what I always do first is I start with what's in the parentheses. So I can say -7 plus 2 becomes -5 squared, plus, and then I have -7 minus 3 becomes -10 squared. And then my next part, I go ahead and I do the squaring, which becomes, so -5 squared becomes 25, plus, and then -10 squared becomes 100. And then my last step is to go ahead, add these together, which becomes 125. And so then I'm left with just the square root of 125. So if I took 125 and squared it, I would get 11.18. So it might be written like that. It might be written just as a square root of 125. It just depends on how it's written. So this answer, I'm going to say 11.18 is my answer. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the next one. Go ahead and erase all of this. All right, so first I'm going to go ahead and label my x1, y1, and x2, y2. And I'm going to start plugging them into my equation. So x2 is -8 minus my x1, which is -10 squared. Add a line, change the sign because there's two negatives next to each other. Plus my y2, which is 1, minus my y1, which is -7. Add a line, change the sign. Now I'm going to go through the same way I did last time. Start with what's in the parentheses. So I have -8 plus 10, which would give me 2 squared, plus I have 1 plus 7, which is 8 squared. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my squaring. So 2 squared will give me 4, plus 8 squared, which will give me 64. Last step in simplifying is to go ahead and add these two things together, which will give me the square root of 68. Now we can leave it as the square root of 68, or you can go ahead and plug it into your calculator, which will give you 8.25. So go ahead, try these next two on your own. So let's go ahead and review these questions you did. So I'm going to start again by labeling my x1, y1, and my x2, y2. So we plug them in. And again, if you notice, when I do these, I do the exact same steps every single time. By doing the same steps every single time, we are allowing your brain to remember what you did. So then when you get to the test, you don't even have to think about it. Your brain already kind of knows what to expect and what to do. So it's really important to follow the same steps every time. So we'll start simplifying by adding what's in the parentheses. So -1 minus 2 gives me -3 squared, plus 4 plus 9 will give me 13 squared. Next step in simplifying, we do the squaring part. So we have 3 times 3, or 3 squared, which will give you 9. And then 13 squared will give you 169. Now, if you notice, whenever we do these, it's never going to be negative. You might plug -3 squared into your calculator and get -9. But when you do that, you have to add those parentheses, because what your calculator is doing is saying 3 times 3 and make it negative instead of -3 times -3, which will give you 9. So make sure whenever you do these in your calculator to include the parentheses, or you'll get a wrong answer. So our next step in simplifying is to go ahead and add these two things together. And when you add them together, you get 178. Now our last step is to take the square root of that answer, which will give you 13.34. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this next one. So we start by plugging them in. So our x2 is going to be -1 minus our x1 of 8 squared plus y2, which is 3, minus our y1, which is 5. Same steps every time. So that'll give me -9 squared plus -2 squared. Nine times 9, or -9 times 9, -9 squared, will give me 81. -2 squared, or -2 times -2, will give you 4. Last simplification is to go ahead and add them together. And then if you wanted to simplify that even further, you take the square root of 85, and that'll give you 9.22 as your answer. All right, we're going to try a different type of these problems now. So when we're looking at a point, it's something like this, and it just says, here's the graph, find the distance between these 2 points. Find the distance of the line, the length of the line. We would use distance formula. So I'm just going to label these point A and point B. Our first step is to figure out what our points are, so we know what we need to plug into these equations. So if I look at this, starting at 0, 0, I move over 1, 2, so this is -2, and then I don't go up or down, so it's -2, 0. Then for B, I go over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the x is 5, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So -5, because we're going down, so it's going to be negative. All right, so now I have my 2 points, and I can label them x1, y1, and x2, y2. So I'm going to go ahead and start plugging them in. So my x2 is 5 minus my x1 of -2 plus my y2 is -5 minus my y1 of 0 squared. And then in keeping with our same steps, we're going to do the same things we did before. So remember to add a line, change the sign when you have two negatives next to each other. So we have 5 plus 2, which is 7 squared, plus negative 5 minus 0 will just give you negative 5 squared. So then we square those, which will give you 49 plus 25. So then we're going to go ahead and add those together. So 49 plus 25 will give you 74. And again, use your calculators. They're there as a resource, so go ahead and use them. And then we're going to take the square root of that answer. Which will give you 8.6. So if you have something that gives you a graph and it says what's the distance between these 2 points, or it says find the length of the line, you would also use the distance formula. So try one like this on your own. Now you've gotten a chance to try this one on your own. So let's go ahead, start by labeling. So this is going to be point A and point B. And it doesn't matter which one's A and B, it just helps you to organize yourself. So then we need to determine what these points are. So I'm going to go from 0, 0 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So negative 5 on the X. And then we go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So up 5. So this point is negative 5, 5. Then again, starting in 0, 0, we go over 1. So the X is 1 in this point. And then down 1, 2. So negative 2 for that Y point. And again, we can label these X1, Y1, and X2, Y2. So then let's go ahead and start plugging them into our formula. So our X2 is 1 minus negative 5. So we can add a line, change the sign. Squared plus Y2 is negative 2 minus Y1, which is 5, squared. Then we'll go ahead and add them together. Oops. Which will give me 1 plus 5, which is 6 squared, plus negative 7 squared. Then next we're going to do the squaring, which will give you 36 and 49. So then we're going to add those together. Which will give you 85, and then you take the square root of that will give you 9.22. All right, and that's the end of distance formula.